Hello, everyone. I am Andrew, and welcome back to the Rainbow Room. And today I'm here with a very exciting guest, Connor Doherty.
Hi, happy to be here.
How's it going, Connor?
It's going well. Had a busy work day and now I am locked in and ready to talk about this.
What do you do for work? What's your day job?
I work in software design on the content side.
On the content side. Okay, cool. What does that mean? Does that mean you're a content creator for software, or it means you're actually working on
That's a
software?
very fair question. I sometimes give vague answers so no one asks any follow-ups. I work in UX design specifically.
Okay,
So
cool, cool,
web
cool.
copy, interface design, that
Do,
stuff.
do you make so I discovered Connor on TikTok. You may have seen he has all these viral TikToks where he well, I mean obviously the one that I reach out to him because of is the one most relevant to this podcast of like was this queer character good representation, and he goes through a list of them. But you have content that kind of spans a lot of different topics, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I used to have a lot of Disney stuff back in the day, a lot of entertainment, pop culture, queer media.
Do you also big week for TikTok, huh? We are recording right after the almost ban and not ban. How is that for you? Do you make money off of TikTok? Was TikTok part of your career? Was this like a big existential thing? What was the vibe for you?
It was a vibe for sure. This isn't a full-time job of mine by any stretch, but I do make money off the platform, mostly through views, actually. I don't do any real like brand deals or partnerships. So it was definitely like spending money and coffee money that was on the line. So I'm glad that it's back, but I do wonder long term what the app will become and if there are going to be changes to the algorithm and ownership and how that will change how people use the product.
Yeah, are you I don't know much about your, I guess, quote unquote career as like content creator. I mean, how much do you identify with that as like and what are your kind of career goals? Have you thought of I know you're where are you right now? You're physically in
Boston,
what's your
Massachusetts.
exact address? I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'll go meet you downstairs.
No, you're in Boston. Have you ever thought about moving out here to LA?
I have an ex-boyfriend that lives in LA. I spent a decent amount of time there. It's not for me personally. I also hate driving, so you can't catch me in a city where I have to depend on a car.
Okay, how about New York?
I don't have as good of an excuse for New York. I'm from here originally. My work and friends and family are all here, and I'm a creature of comfort. So
Yeah. Well,
one,
it's
yeah, one day.
one day. Okay. It was interesting because you clearly have some talent, some crowd appeal. So I was just curious as to, and you, I think I saw a stand-up clip, right? You do stand-up too?
Yeah, and you do as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For my listeners that haven't heard from me in a while, one of the reasons I moved to LA. I still was dabbling a little bit, and then I kind of just took a break. I was like, all right, I need to like
Mm.
focus on actually moving here, and so now I'm really jumping back into the game, which is exciting. So I've been doing as much stand-up as I can, and I also have a show now, which I've started since our last episode called Queer Roast for the Straight Hosts. It's been super fun. It's three queer comics, three straight comics, and the queer comics roast the straight comics. Everyone does a set, but then in between the sets, I'm having these, and I also I'll like challenge the straight comics to some gay game, like have them try drag or answer questions about their gay experiences if they've ever had any stuff like that. Um, it's a really fun time. It's a romp. So,
Yeah, I
if
saw
you ever
some clips. Really,
you've
really
seen some
fun.
clips,
Yeah, on your Instagram.
oh, thank you. Yeah, come check it out. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and
Mm.
I I used to be like really big into creating content on TikTok as well, and now I think that's kind of been replaced with me trying to do a lot of the stand up stuff. And so a lot of what I
Mhm.
post now on TikTok is more just like my stand up clips and stuff like that. And especially I'm putting more time right now into the show's TikTok than my own. But I want to get back into it sometime. It was so much fun. Like I miss content creation. You're still like actively doing it, right?
Yeah, well, I live alone and I work from home, so I do have a lot of ample free time and also just brain power that is going to be untapped unless I do something with it. So I'm often filming videos during lunch or right after work, and I'll just churn through things as fast as I can. I'll be like switching t-shirts. So I try to make 2 to 3 videos a week, and I find that that's a pretty good cadence. And I'll pull back when my mental health on the app is taking its toll,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
things
yeah.
get views or likes, and like I feel bad about myself. I need to take a minute.
Mm-mm-mm-mm. That's cool. A little tea break from TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. And you said you'll switch shirts, so it's like you basically will film three in the same time, but make it look like it was 3 different days, kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know why I do that. It's not like I'm a fashion influencer by any stretch. I could wear the same t-shirt. No one cares. It would probably be easier if I wore the same clothes, but sometimes I'm like, today I have to look more beautiful for this topic. And so I'll pick something nicer. Other days I'll just look ragged, but that's okay.
Well, you look great right now for what it's
Thank
worth.
you.
For all our listeners who can't see him, he has a beautiful mane of hair, some nice earrings, some nice facial hair
Thanks.
going on, a cute sweater. So yeah, you kill it with the looks department.
Thank you. I did it for you.
Oh, thank you. You talked about an ex-boyfriend. Are you single now?
Yeah, I am. Well, it depends on who asks.
Oh,
Depends on who asks. Not because I'm dating anyone, but because I'm trying to feel people away.
oh, I see. So it's like you're single but not available.
Well, it's interesting. I have a majority female following on TikTok, and some of them will follow me over to Instagram. But the men are the ones who find me on Instagram, and I entertain some conversations and chats, and sometimes people get a little bit too forward. So I like to maintain a little bit of an air of mystique.
Oh, okay. Are you? We can edit this out if you're not. Are you open about your sexuality online?
I don't think I couldn't be. Yeah, I'm not. I think everyone within like a 15-mile radius knows that I'm gay. Just based
Okay.
on sense. It's like a spidey sense.
So these girls that are following you, they're not like getting their hearts
No, they
broken when
just
they go to your Instagram and finding out you're gay.
no, they just love the diva. They're the
Yes.
type that will be like, I would love to go to Disney with you. I'm like, that is beautiful. We won't be doing that, but I really appreciate the spirit of that request.
Wait, that's so fun. I love that. All right, cool. This kind of leads into my next question. We have a segment on the podcast. As part of our mission to create an authentic queer tapestry of queer people's lives, I'd love to ask, Connor, what was the gayest thing you've did this week?
The gayest thing I did, well, it is Wednesday. I am rewatching AJ and the Queen on Netflix. It's the RuPaul show, if you've never seen it. I'm watching it for the fourth time. It's a weird winter comfort show where I'll just sit in front of the TV like it's cat TV and just absorb the visuals. And so that is a gay IV drip that I've been taking for about a week.
So what show is this?
AJ and the Queen, it's starring RuPaul. It came out in 2020 during COVID. And it's about a drag queen who gets grifted by her ex-boyfriend, and she has to go on the road to perform shows across the country. And this precocious 10-year-old stows away on her RV. And so they go around the country, hitting up other places and performing. It's very Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Tu Wong Fu vibes, but
Oh,
with
it's like
RuPaul.
a scripted fictional piece, and
Yeah,
RuPaul is starring it. She's the
yeah,
main
it's
character.
absolutely. It's like 10 episodes, and RuPaul's acting is transcendent. Whether that's good or bad is up.
Oh man, we watched it on the pod. We watched But I'm a Cheerleader, and RuPaul is in that as a dude,
Good.
and it's so trippy.
Mhm.
Like seeing, like even referring to RuPaul with he him pronouns always feels weird.
It feels off. Yeah, it feels off. I love RuPaul of the 90s, the very Brady Bunch movie, but I'm a cheerleader. There's a lot of good things that he did. I love RuPaul in a way that I can also hold space for him maybe being a bad person. I just find him very entertaining.
That's so fun. Yeah. The gayest thing I did this week was on Monday night. I went out drinking with some friends. A couple. It was actually cool. My friend hits me up and he's like, "Hey, I have some friends who are in the ensemble cast of Wicked, the touring musical, and one of them wants to catch up. So we're gonna go to the bar tonight if you want to come." And I was like, yeah, sure. So I got to meet some people who dance and sing in Wicked, which was really cool.
Wow.
Shout out to Wicked, the touring musical. I'd love to see them in person. They were really, really great people. And the other thing that was cool, I won't mention what bar we were at, but we were at a bar in LA, and Chris Colfer was there, which is so funny. We almost talked about doing.
Hurt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Kurt from Glee, and it was extra trippy because I just rewatched some Glee over winter break, and I was like, oh my God, this show is so fun.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I need to watch, like, I'm due for a full season one rewatch, but it's really, really funny. And I also, my friend was like showing me random favorite clips of Glee, and so I got to see like Kurt kind of throughout the seasons, and he
Mhm.
has one line where it's so cheesy, but I love it. He's like, it doesn't matter if you're gay or straight. What matters, we're friends. And I was like, aw, I love stuff like
Oh,
that, and I feel like we've gotten away from that and it's coming back in. I think straight people are having a moment in terms of like gay people being cool with them and getting along with straight people again. Obviously, the country's super divided right now, but in the parts of it that are not toxically against each other, there's a lot of that going on, which is great. Um, so yeah, seeing him in person was surreal. I did not have a chance to like mention to him that like, oh, I love your work, which I really wanted to do. It was also a very LA moment, and I mean this in a good way, in that like no one was bothering him and his friends. Like
mm.
they honestly, if I hadn't known any better, they would have just been like other random gay people at the bar because they were truly being able to have such what seemed from the outside like such a normal experience, which I thought was really beautiful, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that's nice about LA is people kind of respect and give celebrities their space, which is really nice.
Yeah. See, if I had seen him in Boston, I would have stared the entire evening because we don't get those celebrity folks around here.
Yeah, I mean that was actually the other thing is like my friends were so chill about it. I'm like, y'all, this is insane. Like this is crazy. It's
Yeah.
like, can we have a moment together? Can we all just like geek out a little bit, gleek out a little bit?
Bleak
Uh
out. Yeah.
Yeah. I've only been in this is my like 10th month in LA now, so it's all celebrity sightings are still really cool for me. I saw Jim Rash the other day. I
Oh
didn't say
wow.
hi, but that was cool. And yeah, I'll mention this. I at the same bar, one of my friends went to high school with Dylan Mulvaney and she was there and she like
Oh
came
wow.
up and talked and some of my friends didn't recognize her and as she was like talking with my friend one of my friends like tried to get my attention. I was like, not now. I was like, there is something happening right now and he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, we'll talk about this later. But she one was gorgeous, so
Hmm.
pretty, and then two,
Cute.
she like went around and introduced herself to everyone at the table. She was so sweet. The fact she came up to me and introduced herself to me, I was like, this is crazy. I just like played it cool, didn't freak out, just like tried to be normal, but inside I was like, ah, this is crazy. Um, so yeah, I love LA.
Love that. It's so interesting with TikTok people in particular because the platform is so large that you either like know someone so well or you've never heard of them.
Yeah,
Like if you put two girls in front of me and said which one of these is Alex or Earl, I'd be like, I don't know. I've never seen that girl. I just know her name.
that's so funny. Do you get recognized?
I've been recognized a few times in Boston. Once some girl yelled at me from out of her car, which was I thought I was gonna get like accosted, but she's like, I love your videos. My sister and I watch them. I was like, amazing. And then another time I was at this gay bar and I was getting a water from the bartender. He's like, I recognize you. You're the Disney guy on TikTok. I was like, sure. He's like, you grew your hair out. And I was like, yep, I did. Thank you so much. I was like, I don't know if I want the Disney guy to be what sticks, but
I mean, there are worse things to be called. What would be your preferred moniker?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Oh, you're that one TikTok twink.
Twink, I'm 31, but I'll take that. No one's calling me twink these days. Not
No,
in
you're a twonk. You're a
the red
twonk,
lighting.
if anything.
Twunk. Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah.
'Cause
Um, well, sweet. So we haven't even gotten to this yet, but what we're here to talk about today is
Degrassi.
Degrassi. Sorry.
I don't know. They're Canadian. They can say it however they want.
Are they? Oh, it is Canadian, isn't it? Oh yeah, because
Yeah.
Drake. Um, yeah. So I had never seen this. I'd heard of it. I thought it was like before our time. I didn't realize it was like this. It came out in 2001. That's wild.
Well, it's actually a reboot of a show from the 80s. So technically, 80s or early 90s. So technically, you're right. It did come before us.
True, but I feel like that's what I was trying to figure out. It's like, all right, when people mention Degrassi, are they normally talking about like this recent one or like the
Mm.
old one. But I think people usually, if they mention Degrassi, they're talking about because I've heard about it in passing here
Yeah.
and there, you know. But yeah, okay. So it came out in 2001. First of all, how did you discover this show?
Yeah, so I believe that they aired Degrassi on Nickelodeon, like Teen Nick when I was growing up. So I would watch it on Nickelodeon and I don't think I knew that it was Canadian until I picked up on, if you listen closely, they all sound very Canadian with the way they pronounce things, but I used to watch it after school and like late at night and it was one of the shows. It was like Unfabulous, Degrassi, Ned's Declassified. It was in the rotation of all those like pre-teen shows that I loved.
Well, it's interesting because it doesn't. It feels a little edgier. It's when I watched like the first
Hmm.
episode, it's like, what is the target demographic? Because it's like it definitely has that like Parent Trap type feel of like, oh, the kids kind of have a lot of agency, and it's
Yeah.
focusing on the kids a lot, and so like it feels like it's meant for that demographic. But then I was pretty surprised when she was like, "It's not like we're having sex, Mom." I was like, "Oh, my parents wouldn't probably let me watch this until." We'd have to talk. And it's also like not something I'd watch with my family. I don't think it's weird.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm one of four, so my mom didn't really supervise her television. I don't really know if she was aware. Degrassi was very much like I don't know if you've ever watched Skins, like the UK show, but it was
No.
very much this kind of like angsty teen show, but in this PSA format. Like it's very, this is the topic of the day, this is the issue of the week, and they talk about every issue under the sun. And when I was growing up, I was like, this is edgy, and now as an adult, like rewatching, I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty cheesy.
But I mean, it is kind of cool. It's also
Yeah,
that like something would do that it would be like, all right, here's an issue that's topical. Let's tackle it right
yeah.
here right now. Like, that's a pretty quick turnaround time of like yeah issue to doing something about it, which is cool.
Yeah, I think the show ran for maybe like 9 to 10 seasons,
Yeah,
and
there's
then
so many seasons.
they rebooted it again. It was a show called Degrassi Next Class, which I believe was a Netflix exclusive in like 2018, 2020. So the show really went on for quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And it also kind of makes sense that they then would cover LGBT issues, which they,
Yeah.
the episodes specifically we'll be looking at are what was it, season 2 or season 3? Um
Season 3, I think.
yeah, season 3 it's like episode 6 and 7, Pride part 1 and 2. So they did a 2 episode part specifically called Pride. Which I was surprised to see. I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't just like oh a gay character mentioned. Like this is focused on that gay issue,
Yeah.
and so that makes sense that a show that tackles issues kind of as timely as they can would cover this. And yeah, so let's see. This came out in 2001. Probably season 3 was out like a couple of years later. 2001, I was like what, third grade, fourth grade, like
Yeah.
definitely still in the. I mean, I was probably still too young that my friends weren't using the F slur yet, but a
Oh,
couple
yeah.
years later, it was. It is so funny to think about. Like, if I could time travel and go back, I'd probably be cringing so hard at just like how often the F slur got dropped and how casual people would be like, "Oh, that's gay. This is gay. Whatever." Like,
Yeah. It was just
yeah,
like a placeholder, like slur. It was like anything could be it.
yeah. And you said you're 31.
Yeah, I must have been, like 8 or 9 when the show first came out, and I definitely wasn't watching it when it first came out. I think it was a few seasons in that I started watching, and then somehow kind of like found my way back to the beginning.
What time slot would it air in? Because like Nickelodeon is for kids. That's what's surprising me that this was on Nick.
I want to say it was either at like 9 p.m. or like 3 in the afternoon, one of those two slots.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm sure that it was a very controversial show at the time, and that the way that they talked about things, and had my mom known when I was watching, she probably wouldn't have appreciated it, but I think it's because they were a little older than me. I thought this is what life will look like, and that's why I was so invested. I was like, this is what
Mm-mm.
high school is, and this is what the drama is like, and all the dynamics. And then it's not really like that, but I was really bought into the fantasy of it.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'll save this for after the break, but I'm so excited to even just talk about because like the premiere episode, I was literally because Connor told me about this. That's how I had never watched it. I'd heard mention of it. I don't even remember. And Connor was like, "Oh, let's do Degrassi," and I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know that had queer characters." And then I was watching it. And I was like, "Oh my God, this show!" I was like texting Connor. I was like, "I'm so glad we're covering this because I need to talk to someone about this. This is incredible."
The first season of that show in particular, I remember being a lot to handle. I think that they were maybe like figuring out what the tone of it was still. It gets a little bit, I don't want to say lighter, like topic wise, but I think you just adjust. It's like getting into a pool. Once you're in the Degrassi pool, you can take in everything it has to offer, but it's definitely a bit of like a shock to get into it.
Yeah. What do you think was the overall kind of vibe with Degrassi? Were people was it getting good reviews? Were people liking it? Were people into it? Are people into it?
I find that the people that were into it then as adults are the people that are queer or they have a mostly queer friend group or they got in
Mm-mm-mm.
a little bit of trouble at home. Like it was sort of like the misfit show. I don't think anyone who was incredibly well adjusted was really into Degrassi. I think you had to have a little bit of you had a little bit of spice. But I don't remember I only remember girls watching it, and we were talking about it at like recess and stuff. But I don't think my brother watched it. I think it was very much me and the girls kind of show.
God, you were so young when you were watching this. That's so funny. Talking about it at recess with the
I
girls.
know. It was that and American Idol. It was like those were the two things I wanted to talk about.
Man, you were really gay, weren't you? Like even at that age, you were like, "Hey,
That's why.
girls."
Well, that's why when you were like, well, do people not know? I'm like, no, they've always known. I think it was just a matter of like when I felt like agreeing with them and being like, yeah, you're right.
Okay, fine, you got me. I'm gay.
Yeah,
All right, sweet. Where are you ready to watch the show?
I am. Yeah.
All right, let's watch the show. And we're back. Woo!
Woo.
Okay, so even before we talk about the Pride episode, I just want to talk about the show in general, because it is so wild. Like the first episode, like the opening credits start with the young girl like sending emails, and then like also in the beginning credits she has like this or beginning part she has this long distance relationship thing going on, and so it makes it seem like the whole season is going to be about this girl and her like long distance crush. And then immediately they like list some concerns of like, oh yeah, be careful with meeting strangers on the internet. I was like, oh, they must just be doing that to cover their bases to make sure. And then nope. Episode 2, she meets up with him and it's fully a pedophile.
Hmm. It's bold to start a show with that
Yes.
and then expect people want to watch more of it. When I saw the first, I was like, I don't think this is the show for me. And it's kind of an outlier in that they deal with other difficult topics, but that's not really anything I know it's real, but doesn't mean I need to see it depicted in like a kids teen show.
Yeah, it was wild. It's like I cannot believe they went here. This is episode 2.
Yeah.
Like what? Uh and I'm glad it's a good lesson, but I'm also glad that I think like knowing that that's kind of the vibe of the show of like how on the nose and directly they hit these issues does give important context for then watching the Pride episode where I'm like, "Oh my God, this is all so on the nose." And it's like, "Well,
Mhm.
that's kind of what
That's
you're getting." What?
that's the show. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, what's good for the goose is what's good for the gander. At least they're like handling these things with the same approach. Oh my gosh. uh, it's especially it's such a twist because you think the whole season's going to be about her talking with this guy, and then immediately it's like, oh no.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the show, and I don't know of many shows like it, but the cast is so large that they really rotate through the characters pretty fast and they cover so many people throughout a season. So you're getting so much stuff because it's happening to everyone throughout the season. And I recall watching the show, there would be a character who goes through the worst thing you've ever seen, and then you don't see them for 8 episodes, and then they just like come back and it's like they're back, everything's normal. Because they're following like 20 kids. They don't have the time to chart their trauma.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I this is we'll just cut to the end here, but like the very end of Pride Part 2, it like ends with Marco getting in a big fight with Spinner,
Hmm.
and then you're like, how is this going to resolve? And then I watched the next episode, and he's just not in it. I was like, oh, Marco
Yep.
is not in this episode at all. It's like, well, I wonder what happened to him. I hope he's doing well.
Yeah, I swear they had to like work around their school schedules or something. Like, oh, he has to go back to school for a couple days, so we'll catch him in like another 3 episodes. We'll figure it out then.
That's it's so funny. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah, so let's talk about this episode. So as I said, very on the nose. It's immediately starting with like um people being like, "Oh, that's gay," and "Oh, you want to be like that," you know. They use the F slur in this too, which is wild. It's like
Yeah.
this was on Nickelodeon. That's wild.
I wonder if the word has less weight in Canada or if it was just a really different time and they could do that on television back then.
Oh yeah, and you brought up a really good point during the break that this is because this is Canadian. You know, sometimes we talk about when gay marriage got legalized in the U.S., um, which we saw was like the first state was 2011, and the nationwide is 2015, and then who knows how long that's going to last
I
in
know.
the current climate. But the so this episode came out in 2003. Gay marriage in Canada was legalized in 2005. So
Mm,
one, wild that this all came out before while gay marriage was still illegal, which seems so archaic to talk about. That's just
yeah.
wild. And then two, interesting that Canada beat us. And as you said, that's not a surprise.
Yeah. They seem to beat us in a lot of progressive politics. So I was surprised it was that much earlier, but not surprised in general.
Yeah. Um, anyway, so we have yeah, it's in Canada. They're hearing the F slur. And there's also pretty immediately kind of this uh character introduced, which he's introduced this episode. From what I saw, his name is Dylan,
Hmm.
and he's fine. He's really cute.
Yeah, 10-year-old me was like, "Oh, okay. I see what we're doing here."
Oh my God. Yeah, I sometimes wonder if it would have changed my high school experience if I had met any gay men I was attracted to. Because I had not.
That's so real. I went to an all boys Catholic high school and there weren't any options. So I was like, it's actually probably better for me to just stick in this closet until I get out and then I can explore and figure things out. But if there had been options, maybe I would have approached it differently.
Really, I mean, isn't the stereotype that when you're like in the old those all boys colleges that those repressed guys are like willing to experiment more? That's wild.
Oh, it's definitely true that straight boys are the gayest of any group. I truly think that gay men like we're like, well, I don't know what they're doing over there because they do the wild things. But it's the moment that they know that you aren't part of that like inner circle that's like, oh no, you're not allowed to participate in this. Like you are not like us. I'm like, I don't think I want to be like you if that's what you guys are doing over there.
Interesting. That's wild. Well, I'm sorry that you had to experience all that.
Builds character.
Builds character. So it sounds like you had a very different high school experience from Degrassi.
Yeah, unfortunately. I would have loved the Degrassi experience.
Yeah. Um, So yeah, Dylan's very cute. Also, so the it becomes Marco has already come out before this episode.
Mhm.
So, you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, he dates Ellie in season 2 when he's introduced as like a bit character. I don't think he's in that much of it. And then he ultimately comes out to her, and then she keeps this secret with him, and everyone else thinks that they're still dating and that they're in this relationship, but she's the only one who knows that he's gay.
Yeah. Um, and then Spinner is like Marco's best friend. Everyone's trying to they are all out playing volleyball, and they all think that um, Ellie and Marco are still dating, and then but also there for the first time is what's her face's brother. What's her name?
Oh, Paige.
Paige's brother, Dylan. It's clear that Dylan and Marco have some chemistry, and so Dylan is the first one to be like, "Oh, I think Marco might be gay."
Mhm.
And they're like, "Dylan, not everyone is gay. Like, that's just you." And he's like, "I don't know."
He clocked it.
Clocks it immediately. Um, and also, like, it's Marco's pretty cute too. He's not a bad looking. I hope he's old enough by the time we're saying this. Was he in school? I don't.
I think he was definitely, with Degrassi, it's so hard to tell. There's so many of them that I'm like, some of you had to still be like teenagers, but I think that some of them were older than the characters they played. But he is very interesting. It's weird watching it now because I can't tell what was just the fashion of the time and then what was him dressing like a gay guy because I'm like he had like a puka necklace and like very feathered hair and like a little tank top. So I'm like maybe that's what straight men looked like in 2003, but it set some flags off for me when I saw him step out of the car.
That's so funny. Yeah, I guess, and I assumed that he'd had a bigger role throughout the season, but you're saying like up until now he'd been a pretty bit character, which is kind of how they do things on Degrassi, huh?
Yeah, they kind of test the waters with characters, but it is nice that they set the scene and had him come out privately earlier on in the show so that when they do have an episode like this, it's not like it's the one time they're talking about this topic. It's something that they've planted the seeds for and let bloom over time. So in that regard, I'm like it is handled well in that case.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, we're going to discuss how well this was handled. It's so worth noting that this came out in 2003, so it's like,
Uh, yeah. Well, even we were talking about Glee earlier. If you watch Glee now, there are things that they do on that show that are certifiably criminal. I'm like, everyone who worked on this should be in jail.
it's so good.
It's so good, but it's diabolical at times.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, that's probably what part of what makes it like fun to watch nowadays. You're like, oh my gosh, I miss when you could make
It's
jokes like that.
nostalgic. It's like, oh, I remember when people used to talk like this and do all the things that Sue says. I'm like, still kind of iconic, but you could not do that today.
Yeah, that writing is crazy. God, I love
Yeah.
Sue. Um, anyway, uh, yeah, and then everyone's trying to like push Ellie and Marco together, and he's still not out about it. Again, it's very on the nose. They're like, "Come on, guys, date." It's just like, um, and then they finally. Oh, also worth noting, there's kind of interesting. There's like also simultaneously a B plot, if not also a main plot, is
Mhm.
the fact that Snake has cancer and is developing cancer, and it's like you saying it's a lot. It's like yeah, this is a lot to take in one episode.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, we did the gay thing and the cancer thing in one 22-minute episode. Okay, I guess 42 if you count that they're added up, but
Welcome to
yeah,
Degrassi.
yeah, it goes there. That's the slogan of the show. It's Degrassi, it goes there. And they did go there.
Oh, that's so funny. That's fun.
Yeah.
I was just still thinking about episode one. Good God.
I don't think I could ever watch that again. I would rewatch the show 19 times if it meant never having to see that episode again.
uh yeah, the okay, so then finally he comes out to Spinner, and then this is where I think the show gets a little weird
Mm,
because like Spinner, who's been like, "Oh yeah, we're best friends," just starts acting like a complete jerk.
mm.
To a level that I don't know. I wasn't born in that time, but feels it was clear that the other characters in the show were like, even they thought it was weird, right? Like he really does a complete 180.
Yeah, he's an interesting character in that he's definitely the problematic straight guy. He bullies, he does a lot of bad things throughout the show, but he also is one of the few characters that's given a lot of runway to learn from his mistakes and grow as a character, which I think is really interesting. And is sometimes a privilege only like straight male characters are afforded. They're given the
Mm,
opportunity to be really complex and diverse because of how accessible they already are. But yeah, at this point in the show, he's very emotionally immature and volatile, and he has like such thin skin. And I will say his acting is pretty bad. I think out of all the worst ones, which is funny because they give him a lot to do. But yeah, he is such a baby. He's such a baby.
yeah, it's they really treat this. He really treats this poor Marco terrible. Like this is like one of the first people Marco comes out to, and then the next day Marco is like, "So this is like a secret you didn't tell anyone." He's like, "Tell anyone what?" And it's just like gaslighting him, like nothing happened. He's like, "You know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about?" It's like, "No, I don't." And then just starts treating him super weird. I'm like, this is so different from my coming out experience. Like when I came out to my best friend, he was like, "Okay, cool. Like you're still my best friend." And I was like, "Oh, that's amazing, you know?" So to see I was like, "I'm glad I didn't see this before I
Yeah.
came out because I already had so much fear about the possibilities of coming out. And if I saw this illustrated, I'd have been like, "Oh my God."
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I've been trying to think through why he responds the way he does to Marco telling him, and I honestly think it's that he feels betrayed and that he didn't know already, and that his
hmm
friend was keeping a secret from him. But I don't think Spinner would have responded positively if Marco had told him in a private setting or had told him when there wasn't any like tension between them. I just don't think he was ready for his worldview to change, and he imploded because of that.
Yeah,
And it had little to do with Marco.
it also seems like the kind of thing that would maybe even be a setup for Spinner being gay too. I feel like normally when
Mhm.
we see a character have this outsized of an emotional reaction to that kind of thing, it's because they're dealing, at least in the media and the TV shows, right? It's
Yeah.
because they're dealing with their own like coming out thing. But that's not what happens, right? That's not the
No,
vibe.
I had a crush on Spinner at the time, and I was like, maybe
Girl,
this were. I
on
don't know.
Spinner.
Honestly, I had a crush on pretty much every boy on the show at some point, and like it's I don't know, it just it happened. But yeah, I don't know, he was a bad boy, and I was like, oh, I don't know, he's kind of a jerk. He out of all the characters felt the most. I spent a lot of time with boys growing up, like boys in my neighborhood, going to school with boys, and so he felt very familiar in that the way that he acted is not that atypical from your average straight boy, especially when they haven't learned how to emotionally regulate yet or ever.
Yeah. I think another cool thing about this is the way that Marco's other friends react because they see that
Mhm.
Spinner's clearly being a jerk to Marco, and they stick up to him. They stick
Yeah.
up for him, um, which uh, actually made me emotional. And it's also really cool because Jimmy, one of Spinner's close friends and
Yeah.
Marco's friends, is played by Drake.
Yeah, Aubrey Graham, that's his OG name. And what's nice
Wait,
about
wait, 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 wait. What?
you didn't know his name is Aubrey, first of
Drake
all.
the rapper's name is Aubrey Graham. Aubrey?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
What?
Drake goes through it on that show. If you ever watch it, you'll see what he goes through. But I what I appreciate about his response, he's the only one that is aware of the situation or mostly aware of it, and he normalizes it immediately out of all the characters because I think you have, Ellie who's telling Marco to navigate the situation in a particular way. And then you have Paige who she's known as like the queen bee of Degrassi, so she's friends with Marco, but it doesn't really feel particularly deep.
Mm.
Uh, so it is interesting that like one of the few straight male characters on the show is the first to jump to Marco's aid and to sort of stick up for him around Spinner. It's like a nice, refreshing change.
Yeah, it was honestly such a good like showing of how it made me think of times when I've had friends stick up for me or wish I'd had
Mhm.
friends stick up for me. And it truly made me emotional because it was like that's so It's so nice. It's so nice to
Yeah,
see a friend stick up for someone, especially when it comes to queer bashing and gay rights and stuff like that. Um, and how ironic and cool that Drake
great.
is is playing this role. Like it's one of his first big roles is this like huge queer ally. Queer, wow. One of his first big roles is this huge gay
Yeah,
ally.
yeah,
And rap is not known for being like great and not homophobic and great allies. So
yeah. And if you keep watching, they do let him rap at some point. I'm like, did Degrassi make Drake? Is this what inspired? Who
that's so
knows?
funny.
Yeah,
Also, like interesting to be talking about Drake in a year like this. He's obviously a lot going on with that as well. I saw a stand-up set earlier that was like be like, man, I thought that was going to be the worst thing that happened to a rapper this year, and then did he happen? So there's a lot going on this year with hip
yeah,
hop.
yeah, yeah.
But I will take it as a win that someone huge in the hip hop community was really on par with being part of this script where he had to really defend a gay character and gay rights in general, which I thought was
Yeah.
really cool.
Drake said gay rights.
Yeah. Also, I would not know it was him. I was like looking for him. I was like, wait, where's Drake? I was like, oh my God, is that him? Like he's so much
Yeah, he
younger.
looks very different as a teenager. Yeah, he's like just this skinny, kind of clean cut kid. Very
Yeah.
different from Drake we know today.
Yeah. Um, And then speaking of Degrassi goes there, uh, just because everything has to happen to every character possible. Uh, when they're on the way to the hockey game to see Dylan, um, freaking uh, Marco gets off on the wrong bus stop and is accidentally by the gay clubs. And he's walking past, he's seeing a guy holding hands. You think it's going to be this really cool inspirational moment where he gets to get a look of like what it could be like after he comes out and like see like, oh, here are people living their lives authentically and having a great time. And then immediately he gets surrounded and gay bashed.
I know that the way, and not to take away from the weight of the scenario, but the way it plays out is very after school special. It's like you asked a middle school class to be like, you need to demonstrate what gay bashing looks like, and then they wrote the script for it. It does feel very on the nose again, as you mentioned.
Yeah, they surround him and they beat the crap out of him.
Yeah, yeah.
That's similar to the episode with the child predator. You're like, oh, this could really go in that direction but like, how are they going to get out of this? It's like, oh, they're not going to get out of this. They are just, this is what's going to happen.
They're committing to the bit. Yeah.
Yeah, woof. And then Jimmy comes to him and gives him a hug, and he's traumatized, and it's really nice to see. Um, yeah, and then the episode ends with him and basically he's so traumatized that he doesn't want anything to do with Dylan anymore, even
Yeah.
though Dylan's still trying to like connect with him, and then Spinner is still upset with him, and they're still fighting, and then the episode ends.
I know what is interesting about it and what I do appreciate about what Marco goes through is that, there's this kind of push and pull about whether or not he wants to come out and live openly, but what happens to him is has nothing to do with that. It's based solely on the unspoken things that he hasn't said, because he's attacked simply because of who he is. He hasn't disclosed that he's gay to these people. It's not like he's coming out of a gay bar. He's targeted because who he is visible to people, and that is dangerous. And so when you consider how Spinner responds to it, it's like he's gay. He can't hide that he's gay. Even if he doesn't tell people that he's gay, he's still at risk in the world because the world still sees him as that. And so I thought that was like a really interesting way of handling something.
Yeah. And that is kind of Spinner's take is like, oh, like just stop being gay, like change it, And the whole idea that being gay is a choice, right? I think people have largely picked up now that it's like, okay, it's really
Um,
not that was like a real take I would hear in high school.
oh
Um
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I remember like hearing one guy debate like, "Oh, I know being gay is a choice because of this and this and this," and I'm like, it's like, okay, that's one example of someone who told you something and you interpreted it this way, and I'm like, meanwhile, my closeted butt was like, I know it's not a choice because I am, and I'm not choosing this. Like it's wild.
Yeah, and what's also wilder about it, and I think kind of unpacking the reasoning behind attacking someone like Marco is like there's a world in which there's a guy like Marco who dresses like Marco and sounds like Marco, but is straight and is still a victim of those circumstances. Because
Mm,
ultimately, sometimes it has nothing to do with the fact that someone is gay. It has more to do with the fact that it's a man who is feminine and a man who isn't, subscribing to masculine gender roles. And that's the threat. And so, what do you even say in those situations? You're like, oh, don't be gay, or why don't you try to be straight? It's like, well, even if I tried to be straight and still walked in the world as the man that I am, that's still not in line with what the world wants me to be as a man. So it's like being gay and being a man are often conflated, but they're two different things.
hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I had a thought and I lost it. But I think what you're saying is really interesting. Um, oh, I know what I wanted to say. Okay. So we've gone through the full episode. What's your verdict? Is Marco good queer representation or not?
Based on the episode alone, or these two episodes, Marco's good queer representation because he's honest queer representation, and I don't think that he does anything that relies on stereotypes or like I think he's a very well written character in the moment and
Hmm.
decisions that he makes, the choice to want to be invisible rather than happy and open is something that so many queer people have to reconcile with at some point. And I think that it's pretty good representation for Degrassi. I don't think they always get it right, but I wish that there was more closure, and I think maybe it comes with time in the show. Doesn't quite end on a satisfying no, but he doesn't do anything problematic.
Yeah, and you've talked to me about how in the future there's actually a lot of queer characters. You said they even have a trans character in this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how can you give us a brief rundown of some of the queer characters that we see and how they do at representing them?
Yeah, so Paige, who we mentioned earlier, is Dylan's sister. She later comes out as bisexual and dates a girl on the show. And then there are a handful of other queer characters that come in, whether it's, queer women, uh, lesbians, gay men, and the trans man, I think his name's Adam. He came in, I want to say like 2012, 2013, so later on in the course of the show. And I think there is a point in the show where it's not quite caught up to the politics of the world. So I think that they did, trans representation. Did they do it well? Probably not. I don't know if they were equipped to
Hmm.
do that eloquently, but I think overall, being able to point to like more than four characters in a show and be like, yeah, these were all queer characters is pretty big, even by today's standards. And I think that's what's nice about their approach of having so many characters in the fold is that there's space to showcase a lot of different experiences and stories.
Yeah, I'll give kudos to that. Like having, you're right. That's a really nice high count of people, especially for as early as that is, and for to have a trans character. And you said 2011, like 2012, like even that. I know it's 2025 now, but even 10 years ago, like it's truly only in the past like few years that trans has become such a buzzword that people are really like
Yeah.
finding the courage to come out as trans and do that more, and that's becoming so widespread. The courage, I should say, not trans people have always existed. So the fact that this is like showcasing that, I think, is really really cool.
Yeah, I think where Degrassi falls short, and it's similar to other shows as well, is that for the majority of queer characters, their storyline is often centered on their queerness. And I
Mm.
think that's, with Marco in this particular episode, the whole thing hinges on the fact that he's gay and doesn't want to come out. And he gets other things as the show goes on that don't center. his queerness, but for the trans man, as far as I remember, that's like him coming out and coming to terms, and obviously that's a big type of representation, especially at the time. But why not have like the gay guy trying out for basketball and having competition, and having that be sort of the narrative there rather than the identity politics within. Identity politics are important, but sometimes characters are only an extension of an identity politic, not like a fully formed character.
Yeah, yeah, nice to have him a little more three-dimensional.
Yep.
My take on this episode is I agree actually. You bring up a good point. Marco himself is actually pretty well written. He feels real. His reactions seem real. It is crazy that he gets beat up. Like that's wild.
No.
I think a lot of what I found maybe like eye rolly about this episode was kind of the other characters around it. It didn't feel real. It's very like easy to write like two-dimensional representations of homophobia and gay bullying and what happens. And I think like the reality, and this is kind of with all bullying in general, is that it oftentimes isn't, not that he gets a swirly, but that's kind of just to kind of
Yeah.
parallel it. It's like if you see a kid get a swirly in a show, it's like, all right, I've never seen that happen. But it's not that I haven't seen bullying. It's like you see bullying all the time. It just happens in more subtle or different ways, the way kind of
Yeah.
like being mean to kids happens. And like so I think it makes it harder to talk about the issue if you like I would have loved to have a little more focus on kind of the microaggressions that were happening, like the
Mhm.
fact that people
Yeah.
were saying like, oh, this is gay, and I'm glad they showcased that and like you could kind of like see that. But it'd be cool to like focus more on those. But obviously, as I said, I would almost love to show this as like this is it almost by today's standards feels like a parody of like everything that we think about when we think about like, oh, this show has written a gay character, it has a gay storyline. Like this is it, that to a T. But I give it a lot of grace because as you said, like, oh, now I know that's how they treat literally everything.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like a PSA that your teacher would play that's on a VHS and have to wheel at the old TV. It's like, this is how we teach the curriculum. It's been the same since 2003.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily live up to today's standards, but there is, I commend it for trying, it bit off more than it could chew, but
Mhm.
I applaud the effort there
Do you have a favorite moment?
from that particular episode.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think I
I,
have one. I can start.
oh yeah, go for it. I'm still thinking.
Uh, well, I mean, the moment that really brought me to tears was Jimmy. When Jimmy comes up to Marco and is like, "Hey, you're coming to the hockey thing, right?" And like, just makes it very clear to Marco that regardless of whatever Spinner's saying, Marco is still invited. Marco is still welcome. I think that hit the most authentic emotional note for me, which was really cool because I wasn't expecting to really get emotional
Yeah.
during this. Um, and then I also really liked like when Spinner made the or someone made the joke of like, oh, be careful not to drop anything in front of Dylan. And so
Oh,
Dylan just
yeah.
drops something at that guy's feet and picks it up. I'm like, dang, that was some BDE. That was so awesome.
Yeah, I love when they give queer characters that sort of angle where it's like, yeah, this guy could beat you up. You should be scared of him. Uh, I definitely share the same moment, but for the sake of giving a different one, I like the moment when I think Marco and Dylan are on the rocks and Marco is clearly upset. And I don't think Dylan asks him, I think he maybe asks if he's okay, but he doesn't pry at all. And I think it's a nice moment in terms of having two queer characters who are at very different points in their coming out and living their lives and how we can be there for each other in solidarity. I thought that was like a nice kind of unspoken moment. I don't think it was as deep as I'm making it sound, but I was like, I'm gonna analyze this at an adult level, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's nice. Whether they meant to do it or not, it is cool that that's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah,
And the fact that there were even two queer characters to interact is fantastic,
that
as you
that
said.
alone.
We don't
Yeah.
always get that. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think it's about time to wrap up. Any final thoughts about the series?
I hope that you commit to watching the other 27 seasons of it. It's a wrap.
I don't know about that. My final thoughts. I think it should be required viewing to watch episodes 1 and 2 of season 1, just because I was like,
That's diabolical. That's evil of you.
diabolical is a good word for it. I remember being like, whoa, whoa, my goodness. It was so fun. I was so glad I had this set up with you to discuss it because I was like, I need to talk about this. Um, and yeah, it's cool. I'm actually surprised I didn't know about this, and I'm glad you brought this on my radar that like Degrassi had this representation. Oh, before I forget to mention, the actor who plays Marco, his name is Adamo Ruggiero. I think I might not be saying it right, but he is openly gay, and um, he. I don't think he ever actually really did anything else besides this. I'm like, oh, now I want to like cast him in something. I want to see. uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I follow him on Instagram now. I'm happy that he portrayed this role for us, and yeah, he seems just from the cursory glance I can get at him, he seems like a really cool guy, and it's cool that we had this authentic representation of like a gay man playing a gay character. And somewhere it's listed that he also helped with the writing, which wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and it's nice that he appears, in I think like 6 or 7 seasons of the show. So when I was watching, I was like, I kind of get to grow up with this character. And I thought that was nice. You don't usually get to see a gay character stick around for so long. And so
Yeah,
but it's worth
sometimes they're
it
dead
to
by
have
the
him.
end of the story.
Yeah, they're dead or canceled, and he managed to survive. So that's a huge win for representation.
Oh, Canada. Well, Connor, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today to discuss this crazy show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Any excuse to talk about Degrassi.
Yay! All right, and thank you to our listeners. Have a good one. Bye.